Pressure is a part of life. Everybody faces pressure, both the rich and the poor. No one is exempted from coming across pressures in life. In fact, we need pressure in order to live, to be motivated, to engage in activities, and to carry on with life in general. Now, not all temperaments, or rather, all temperaments face pressure, but they don't respond to pressure in the same way. Therefore, this chapter is aimed at finding out how each temperament responds to pressure. Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Review with Me podcast. I'm your walkthrough reading coach, Mrs. Temperament. I hope you've been able to catch up on every other chapter of our review. So here we are, reading chapter 10 of the book Why You Act the Way You Do by Tim LaHaye, and we will be talking about facing pressure. Are you ready? Then come with me. Let's go straight in. Now, as I said earlier, every temperament faces pressure. Every human being faces pressure, but the response to pressure is different. But you must realize that each and every person's response to pressure is your responsibility. So instead of reacting to pressure, it is very important to respond to pressure in the right way. And in order to do that, you have to know your tendencies so that you can work on it. So very quickly, we'll be starting with Sparky the Sanguine. Remember, there are those people who love to do things the fun way. Now, for Sparky, because he is a people-oriented people, he is actually a major cause of pressure. Why do we say that? They are people-oriented people and they tend to be around people a lot. Therefore, when you're around people a lot, we know that pressure is never far from where people are. And Sparky is one of the major people to cause pressure. How? He's disorganized, they are termed latecomers, they are very unprepared for events. So imagine a scenario where you're preparing an event and you allow Sparky Sanguine to be in charge of the event planning. The event will end up, sometimes it may end up getting disorganized, it may be disorganized. I think there's a lot of pressure around it, or he will come late and you need him to put one or two things in order before the event starts. And before you know what is happening, pressure is building up. And hence the statement by Pastor Tim saying that there are major causes of pressure. Now, because of their charisma and their people responding skills, they tend to improvise immediately in the place of pressure. So once they are faced with pressure, instead of reacting, they quickly improvise to make sure everything is covered up. But if you're very smart, you will realize that some things were actually not going on well. Now imagine this is for someone who did not prepare. So when they are more prepared, imagine how they will respond in the place of pressure or without even pressure. They will actually be responding at a higher level of productivity. Now, another thing about Sparky is that because they are very good with their speech, once they face pressure, they quickly tend to shift the blame, or they quickly tend to charm their way away from the situation and refusing to take the blame for their mistakes. Instead, they will shift the blame to someone else or something else, or they will use charm, as I said, to try and chase or to try and remove themselves from the problem. Instead of facing the real problem, they will charm their way away from it. So what's his advice to people who are sanguine? They should ensure they use pressure as a motivation to do better. Use pressure as a motivation to engage in problem solving. Imagine someone who is not prepared being able to improvise in the face of pressure. When they are prepared, imagine how much more they will be able to do. Now let's move on to Rocky the Choleric. Remember, he's the bossy one, the authoritative one who likes to do things his own way. Now Rocky is another person who creates pressure for himself and others. Why? He thrives at it because he pushes people to work. Remember, he's a driver, he's work oriented, and he likes to ensure that he's basically fixed with work. So how does he do this? He moves from one project to another project. If one project fails, he doesn't even have time to sit down and think, okay, why this project failed? He's moving to the next and he's moving to the next. There's no time for depression, there's no time for self-pity. And now, this at the end of the day, he may not feel the pressure, but he'll be creating the pressure for every other person. And that is why it is said that the two extroverted temperaments are pressure creators. So Rocky creates pressure. By moving from one project to the other, he can juggle about 4 projects at the same time. And he, because he's a driver, can work with it, but other people around him cannot work with it. And now, his response to pressure is that he never gives up. If one door closes, another one, he will push through another one. And if that door closes, he keeps on shutting and pushing through another one until he gets the one that works. But what does this now mean for his family? Because he's so carried away with work, he's overloaded with work, he becomes an absent spouse in the family, either female or male. So let's take note of that. It's not just referring to only male alone. Now, he's so absent in the family, they tend to live without him in the family. By the time he comes back, he's so tired, he just wants to sleep. Next day, early in the morning, he's up and he's out to work again. And then at the workplace, he tries at fulfilling or completing projects, but at the expense of people's ego. He talks to them anyhow. He's very brash and harsh with his tongue, and he has a sarcastic tongue. So what is our advice, or what is Pastor Tim's advice for the Sparky, for the Rocky the Choleric, He explains and he advises Rocky the Choleric to establish a priority for life. And how is the priority for every child of God supposed to be? Remember, this is not just for the choleric alone, but for everyone. Your priority should be God first. God should be at the apex of your life and family. Now, after God, the next thing that should come as number 2 is your spouse. It could be either the husband or the wife. It depends on who is the choleric. So if it's a choleric husband, he should ensure that his wife comes second. If it's a choleric wife, she should ensure that her husband comes second. And then thirdly, the family should be considered in the order of priority. So God first, spouse second, that's husband or wife, family third, and then finally your vocation. That way you're able to establish a balance in every area and aspect of your life and thrive to a certain level. Now note that there's no form of perfection. I mean, man is not perfect and we are aiming towards perfection. But once he puts this in perspective, he sets this hierarchy and puts it in perspective, it helps him to be able to streamline. It helps him to come back when he misses or deviates from it. It helps him to a certain level to try and show up. Are we good to go? Alright, now let's move to number 3. We have Martin the Melancholy. Now, Martin the Melancholy is one who bears more pressure than any other temperament. Why do we say this? They have a serious level of restraint. They take in a lot without talking. They take in a lot without complaining. According to Tim, he said they take in so much pressure that melancholies have a low rate of mortality. They have a low rate of mortality as compared to other temperaments. Now, due to their perfectionist nature, they want to do things perfectly, and in their bid to try and do things perfectly, they will focus on things that are unimportant, or they will focus on just one thing and leave every other thing. So you have a project at hand, you are supposed to organize an event, and then you focus on only one aspect, leaving every other aspect. I mean, how are those other things going to get done? You are trying to ensure that you get exact perfection for this one before you move on to the next one, but time is of the essence. I mean, time waits for no one in particular. Now, at the end of the day, they end up being perfection oriented and not product oriented, so they cause pressure everywhere. At the end of the day, they are not able to meet up with their target, they are not able to meet up with what they are supposed to do, and they put everybody around them under pressure. Now, their planning can be a woe when people don't fall into place with what exactly they are doing or what they are planning for. So I tell you, I want to do this, and if you don't agree with it, I will go ahead and do it, not minding what you think. And it makes everybody to be at a standstill, waiting for them to be able to finish that one, especially if they are the ones managing the situation or managing the event. So how does the melancholy, or Martin the Melancholy, create pressure? First and foremost, he actually fears. You remember in our last chapter we talked about dealing with fear and anger, and we said more times every temperament experiences fear, but some temperaments tend towards fear than anger, and other temperaments tend towards anger than fear. So the extroverted tends towards anger than fear, and the introverted tends towards fear than anger. So Martin actually is scared. He's afraid. What if this doesn't go well? What if this doesn't do this? What if it's not as perfect as I want it to be in in my head? What if it's not this? What if it's not that? And before you know what is happening, his fear moves him to begin to mount pressure on people. No, we have to do this, we have to do that, blah 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 blah, and he keeps putting pressure on people. And before you know what is happening, it moves to the next stage, that is worry. So from fear to putting pressure on people, and then to worry. And then as he's worrying, oh my God, I've not done this, and then you find out that he can't sleep, and he's biting his fingernails, he's biting his pen, and trying to figure out things. And the worst part of it all, guess what? Most times their fear never comes to reality. So that fear is just in their head. And that is why we have to deal with that thing called fear. Fear is of the devil. We really have to deal with it. Please, if you really want to understand more about this fear, go back and watch the review on chapter 9 if you missed it. Remember, fear grieves the Holy Spirit. Fear actually quenches the work of the Holy Spirit in our lives. Alright, so finally, our advice for Martin the melancholy is that they should be sensitive to relationships with other people. They should be sensitive to people in order to get relationship. Do you know that most vicious crimes have been committed by melancholists who don't actually have a criminal record? Why? People will ask. Now, the melancholy, as I said at the beginning, takes in pressure and doesn't say anything. He takes it in, he keeps taking in the pressure. And then when he is so filled with pressure, all of a sudden he lashes out. Imagine putting an empty container of insecticide or a spray, an empty spray container in fire, and that is why it is said on the container it is written, it is inflammable, do not burn. So once you put it on fire, it begins to expand and expand because there are still some contents of gas in it, and then after some time it pulls up. So that is how Martin the melancholy does. He takes in a lot of pressure, and then later he lashes out, and when he lashes out, he ends up injuring and wounding a lot of people. Now sometimes the lashing out may be very, very dangerous. Someone who has been hurt several times by their husband or by their spouse will keep quiet. They will keep taking it in, and then one day they will stand up and kill the husband or the wife in their sleep and move on with their lives. And the worst part is you will really suspect them because that is not in their character. So they should learn to always speak out. Don't keep things in. Speak out when you're feeling a lot of hurt, and also be sensitive to other people's relationship. Alright, let's go to the last one, and that is Phil the phlegmatic. Now for Phil the phlegmatic, he also faces pressure. But as we said at the introduction, everyone does not react the same way. Now, in the case of Phil the phlegmatic, he is one to run away from pressure. He detests it. Remember, they hate controversy. They are not confrontational. So, instead of facing the problem, instead of facing that pressure, they will run away from it. So, their logo is actually avoid pressure instead of working on the problem. And you know that when you work on the problem, you automatically get an answer and you move on. What Phil the phlegmatic does not know is that any problem you ignore will end up coming back bigger. It will end up coming back stronger. So that logo of running away from the pressure to avoid the problem is a very wrong way to see things. Now remember, these people are very internal, and we have to observe them very carefully so we can know. If not, they will actually they can just shut down and refuse to talk about a particular issue when they're faced with pressure. They can flee, literally flee from this. That's why we have parents who are phlegmatics finding it difficult to discipline their children. So a child does something, and instead of you to discipline that child, you see the father tell, just wait, when your mom comes back, because this car, I can't believe you did this, I can't believe, and as he said I can't believe you did this, he's taking his toolbox and he's walking out of the house, going into the garage to go and sit down and continue doing something. Or he takes his phone, or whatever it is, a newspaper, and he walks away to go and sit down and wait for the other parent to come and enforce the discipline. And when that parent comes back and it's like, you see, this is your son, this is your daughter, and he's just there at the back. He doesn't want confrontation. He doesn't want to be the one he doesn't want to be called the bad cop. He just wants to remain the good cop. Not because he likes that, but because he hates, or he or she hates confrontation. Now, they also show a very hard level of stubbornness when being pressured into something. So Phil the phlegmatic what happens to them first and foremost is that as a phlegmatic, you know they procrastinate a lot. So when you give them work, they will not do it at first. They will keep procrastinating, and before you know what's happening, the workload builds up, and then people are under pressure to finish it. Now, they have also been blessed with a high level of stubbornness, which protects them from the cholerics, but also has its own default, its own flaws. Why? They are so stubborn that no matter how you push them to do something, they will refuse to be pressured into doing it. And at the end of the day, when you want to blame them, when you are calling them to take responsibility for their action, they will begin to engage in what we call the blame game. Remember Adam? When God called him and said, Adam, where are you? And he said, I hid, I was afraid because I was naked. And he said, have you eaten of the tree I told you not to eat of? And instead of Adam to take responsibility for his action, he said, it is the woman that you gave to me. So he was not just blaming Eve, he blamed Eve and he blamed God. The woman that you gave to me. And that's why God does not choose wives for people anymore. In fact, you have to open your eye. I'm going to look for your wife by yourself. And the highest when you come back and say, God, see the woman that I have found. Who is this woman really? Or who is this man really? Show him to me. Is he someone that will actually work in line with my vision? Can we actually move together? Are our visions aligned? So you pray to get confirmation from God. But for God to come and tell you, say, take this one, take her, this is your spouse. God doesn't do that anymore. And we have Adam to blame for that. Just like we have Eve to blame for us wearing clothes when there's so much heat. Alright, so that's on the lighter note. So therefore, for the phlegmatic, according to Tim, his advice to them is they should start dealing with the problem and not the pressure. Remember I said earlier, any problem you don't deal with will actually come back bigger and stronger. Now, every temperament faces pressure, but our response to pressure is our responsibility and no other person's responsibility. Therefore, instead of reacting to pressure, it is very important that we respond to it rightly. And that is why this review is very important. So you know your tendencies. You know the tendencies you have to respond to react to pressure. Now work on yourself with the help of the Holy Spirit in order to respond properly to pressure, and also be thankful and content with wherever you find yourself. Remember, no temperament is better than the other. I hope you enjoyed the review. Here brings us to an end of chapter 10, which is facing pressure. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe and follow, and invite other people to join us in this review. Let's recultivate once more the reading culture in our society. Thank you very much, and God bless you.